Question of the week: how often do you read comics? What is up, everybody? Justin here, aka No Good Comics, and welcome back to the channel. In my last top 5 picks for New Comic Book Day video, I asked the question, how often do you read comic books? And so today, in this video, we're going to go over some of the answers that people left in that video in the comment section below. And as a reminder, if you want to get involved or participate in some of these questions that I've recently been asking, all you have to do is leave a comment in the comment section below of those top 5 videos each and every week that I'll be kind of coming up with some new ideas and questions, and just trying to understand or see how people approach this hobby in different ways. So again, my question was, how often do you read comic books? I'll start off with my own answer. And for me personally, I do try to read a couple issues a day. And, obviously some days get a little busier than others, and I'm not always able to kind of stick to that. But for the most part, I would say on average, I read about 3 to 4 issues in a day. I like to try to carve something out around lunchtime where I'll read like 1 or 2 issues. And then, of course, by the time I'm going to bed, I'll read it at that time as well. And then it also just depends on the situation. If it's a weekend, I'll probably be able to carve out a little more time to read like a full trade or binge read something that I've been wanting to binge read. The other thing is, it depends on kind of what time of year it is, because, during football season, I am very wrapped up in watching football and things like that. And so a lot of my time goes elsewhere as well. So, but otherwise, if it's not football season, Sundays are a little bit more open for me, and I'm putting a little bit more time into that. And then of course you have, my personal family time that I'm always making sure that I have aside for that time as well. So being able to kind of work around that schedule and making sure that I have, my priorities straight in that sense. So yeah, I think it's definitely doable. And, for anybody who's like trying to figure out ways to, read more, one of the best things that you could do, and something I did adjust to a little bit, was to wake up earlier, try to do it that way, or the opposite side, which is what I'm currently now doing, and that is to just stay up a little later. So I will usually stay up about an hour later past, my girlfriend, by the time she falls asleep, and then I'll read a couple comic books, at the kitchen table before bed. So that's kind of a part of the time that I'm able to carve stuff out. Otherwise, like I said, lunchtime usually is a great opportunity as well to kind of read a couple of those if I'm not going to, unless it's like New Comic Book Day or something and I'm going to the shop. But anyways, so that's kind of my gist. Like I said, a lot of it I think does depend on my schedule or what's going on that particular day, or if it's a weekend, so on and so forth. But generally speaking, I do try to get in at least like 2 to 3 issues in a day, maybe more. If I can get that, that's a win. So, but let's get into some of the other answers that people had left for me. And again, I appreciate everybody who took the time to answer this question and leave a comment in the comment section below. And if you're watching this right now, I'd still love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below of this video as well. Make sure you smash the like button if you haven't already. And if you're new, of course, subscribe to the channel. I do appreciate that as well. But yeah, so let's get into some of these answers right now. First up on the list is my man Sove Collector, aka Michael. Michael says, I made a daily minimum requirement to myself of 2 issues per day. I've adhered to that for longer than I remember. Some days I read more and make a day about reading through a large stack of books. It's easy for me because comics is my hobby. I watch so little TV, movies, and don't follow any sports. Comics fills my entertainment needs. Michael, great comment, and you make a great point there. Well, one, like you mentioned, and I kind of talked about this too, I like that you have a rule for yourself of, adhering to at least a requirement of 2 issues a day, kind of keeping you on track, right, with, how much you've gotten through so far, and at least trying to hit that minimum goal. And then the other thing you mentioned is, from what it sounds like, as you mentioned, like comics is your number one hobby. So, of course, you want to put more time into that, and you're not putting as much time into TV and movies and sports and other things like that. So that kind of allows for some of that time to be filled in, which totally makes sense. So yeah, that totally works, and obviously works for your lifestyle and your schedule. And I think it's a great point. I mean, if comics is your number one, like, way of getting entertainment, then, you're probably going to prioritize that. For me, like I mentioned before, like I'm kind of all over the place. I love sports. I follow a lot of, different current TV shows and movies and things like that. So I am trying to kind of balance myself a little bit in that sense, just to soak it all in, I guess. But yeah, if that's, you're drilled down to the comics, then that's great, man. Because yeah, you're able to read more, get involved with a lot more story runs and things like that. So, but I love the minimum requirement. It's a nice kind of way to check in. It's kind of like drinking water, right? Where it's just like, all right, I should have a certain amount of bottles of water a day. Yeah, and that's, by the way, something I'm bad at. I need to get better at that. Anyways, let's get into the next answer here. And by the way, Michael, thank you again for the comment. So the next one up here, let's take a look. Brother John Comics says, I try to read something every day that isn't work-related material. Comics are an easy pickup and put down kind of medium. I then try to set aside a specific time once a week to dedicate comic reading along with that. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate the comment. And yeah, it's a great point as well. Similar to what we kind of talked about, it's nice to make sure that you are putting aside that time to do this. And then as you pointed out too, some non-work related type of reading is always nice, refreshing, right? I know for me, my personal job, like I do a lot of reading as well. So it is nice to kind of have it separate and be able to enjoy yourself in a different, realm or world as we read our comics. So I think that's a great comment there. And yeah, I mean, just like you said, dedicate your comic reading. It is something I think that, you have to put some effort into. So, and otherwise it is easy to kind of pass the time and miss what you've been meaning to read, and hey, that's how we fall behind little by little on some of our reading, right? Our stacks grow and grow, but we get back to it whenever we can. But Brother John, thank you so much for the comment. Let's get into the next one. Cole's Comics claims, I try to read daily, but it turns out to be 2 to 3 days. I wish I could read more, but sleep training my son has made it fairly hard. When we weren't working on that, I did about three books a day ish, but Saturday and Sunday sometimes 10. That's pretty good. So Cole, my man, thank you so much for the comment. Great point. Yeah, I mean, again, kind of adjusting to certain lifestyles, right? I know that you had just had a newborn, so again, congratulations. And that's, yeah, obviously going to kind of change a little bit of your day-to-day activities and so on and so forth. So, I'm glad to see. Obviously, I know you're still very much a dedicated reader and able to kind of carve out time when you can, even if that means maybe not as much as you used to, but still good either way. And yeah, I know Cole loves his comics, so I know he's all in on this stuff and carving out that time. So Cole, I appreciate the comment. Next one up is from Brandon Comics Kings, who says, I read every day, maybe too much. Yeah, Brandon, dude, I am with you, man. I don't think, I mean, I was gonna say, maybe is there such thing of reading too much? I guess the only time it would be that you're reading too much is if it's starting to affect other areas of your life in a negative way. Then maybe you're reading too much if you're not spending enough time with certain friends or family members, or focused on career, other all these other things that come to mind. You want to obviously have that kind of balance. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. I certainly am right there, trying to read every day, as I talked about earlier in this video, dedicating myself to at least carve out a little bit of time during lunch and towards the end of the day. So appreciate the comment, Brandon, and yeah, man, just keep going at it. Next up is by Sleepy Reader 666. I'm going to jump down here. I know he's answering one of my other questions that I asked about Henry Bendix of the Superman Son of Kal-El. But to answer this question of how often do you read comics, he does continue by saying, I have discovered that I read about 2 comics a day. On average, roughly a half hour of reading a day, usually a mix of physical new comics, back issues, some digital, and some out of my omnibus collection. Many days I probably watch YouTube to YouTube comic book videos for more time. But that is while I do chores, cook, answer emails, or even go out for a walk and some exercise. Damien, thank you so much, man. Another great comment there, and I appreciate the comment too about Bendix there, kind of clearing that up. Yeah, so just looking back at your question here, talking about reading about 2 comic books a day on average. I think, like I mentioned before, I'm right there with you, man, and I think that's a if you can fit that into your daily schedule, I think that's a great amount where you're able to really dive into certain things. Whether it's new books or older books. I like that you mentioned kind of the different platforms that you're taking some time to read in. So everything from single issues to omnibus to digital. So nice to see that you're kind of all over the place in that regard as well. And yeah, like you mentioned, like you even are carving time out for YouTube and watching that stuff, and people talk about comic book videos, things of that nature. That's another great point too, that obviously takes up time, right? Is to be able to take time to watch other YouTubers, take time to make your own videos, maybe posting over on Instagram, watching videos and reels over on Instagram. Like all these different mediums obviously take up a lot of our time as well. So but yeah, something to point out for sure in terms of, again, for anybody who's like trying to figure out ways to find more time to read comics, maybe reassess where you're putting your time elsewhere, and maybe change some of that timing around to put a little bit more into comics. But yeah, great points here. Thank you so much, Damien, for the comment. Rick Ray says, I'm usually reading an omnibus or some trades during the week, except on Wednesdays where I read my new floppies. I try to get in around 8 to 12 issues every weeknight. Each ends up being like an hour and a half of reading. Rick, great comment. And it actually brings something up that I wanted to mention as well, that, you talk about how long it takes you to read X amount of issues. I think that plays a huge role is just the idea of how fast are you at reading. Some people are slower readers like myself. I am a very slow reader. And some people just absolutely eat up books the way how quickly they can read comic books or anything. So yeah, I think a lot of that is just, figuring out your own pace. Seeing what works for you. And it also depends too, what you're reading, what type of material or what writer you're reading. Cause I can tell you right now that somebody like Jonathan Hickman, if you're reading something of his is, way more complex, than maybe your average, comic book story or whatever, especially with like some of the X-Men stuff that he's done recently. If you've read any of his run over the past 2 years, you'll know, that there's, full pages that are like typed out almost like a novel, right? Paragraph after paragraph. So it's very different style than your typical, just broken out comic, bubbles and so on and so forth. So depending on that also can add on time. And then as Rick pointed out here, it does depend on just kind of how fast you read and measure yourself out that way. So that's awesome, man. You're reading an hour to hour and a half, getting 8 to 12 issues in. That's very impressive. Way more than I get done in an hour to an hour and a half. So again, depending kind of who I'm reading, but yeah, really great points there. And of course, as you mentioned, and I'm right there with you, Wednesdays really try to dedicate to New Comic Book Day, and really even Tuesdays. When I'm reading my DC stuff, I try to read my brand new DC books that just come out on Tuesdays. I try to dedicate time to read those then, and then of course Wednesday for the Marvel stuff and all the independent stuff, and then any other DC stuff that maybe I missed. But yeah, other than that, a lot of those other days I'm trying to just like spread out, and of course I'm reading older stuff, the Omni X-Men stuff that I'm doing with John, and just breaking down other random issues here and there with friends from the community, which is always a good time. So yeah, really appreciate that comment, Rick, as well. Let's go on to the next one. My man, Copy 801, he says, I've been reorganizing and cataloging my collection over the past few months, so my reading time has been minimal. If I were to estimate, I read about 5 books a week right now. Once everything is organized and cataloged, that number will pick back up for sure. Copy, dude, this is great. I love the comment. And of course, yes, great point on, like I was saying before, like you have to kind of prioritize what you're doing with your time, right? Generally speaking. So one of the things that take up a lot of time is cataloging and reorganizing. And that is absolutely something that I need to do because right now my boxes are very mixed up. The ones here on my left here, very mixed up, and it's hard to find things sometimes. So it's really not good. I'd like to have it a little bit more organized alphabetically, so on and so forth. and right now it's just kind of a mess. So that's something on me. I need to take some time to do that, but again, that requires time, and every time I go to do that, instead I'm like, I just want to read this book first, and that's kind of where my priority's going. So but yeah, it's nice to hear that you're carving out some time to do that, and you're still able to read about 5 books a week. I think is fantastic. I think that's a great amount of books to read. It certainly can set you up to, complete a trade if you're kind of in diving into that aspect of it, or if you're just, reading into a bunch of new issues as well. I know that you're big on some of the new comic book stuff that comes out each and every week as well. So, but yeah, so solid 5 a week, I think is definitely good. So again, Copy, thank you so much for the comment. Next up, we have Mark Robinson. Mark says, since I've returned to collecting, I read comics in a weird way. I immediately read issue 1 if it intrigues me. I then purchase the next 4 or 5 issues and then binge read the other issues months later. If all 5 issues were good, I keep collecting. And I'll do this once a week, sometimes twice, on random days. I think I read books this way because I forget what happened in the previous issue, because I purchase a lot of titles. Nowadays, new comics are released weekly, which is a gift and a curse. When I was a kid in the 80s, comics were released once a month. My God, those months seem to last forever. I'd be curious to know if anyone else reads comics the way I do. Mark, fantastic comment. Thank you so much for it. I appreciate it. You make a really great point, and that's something I've actually been considering doing myself. You talked about you read issue 1. If you like it, then you'll continue buying them, but you'll wait until you get enough for one story arc or the first trade is completed, and then you go through and binge the rest. And for one of the main reasons, as you said, is because you're reading so many different titles, it's hard to keep track of what's happening where and when, and just remembering everything. And I totally agree with you there. There are times where I really struggle with that, where I'll jump into issue 3 randomly of a series that I had read a month ago or 2 months ago, and I kind of forget some of the details of the previous issue. And sometimes that really plays a big role, right? I mean, obviously the way these books are written, the reader is expecting you to fully know what you just read prior. And while some writers do rehash certain things to remind you of certain things, or they have the little descriptions to kind of catch you up, but sometimes that's not always enough, right? And so I have definitely been there with you, man, where it's I read a comic and I'm like, wait, how did this happen again? Oh, perfect example was Nice House on the Lake. When I was reading issue 7, just came back last month after they took their long hiatus. And right in the get-go, I read the first 2 pages and I was already a bit confused, and I had to go back and just take a quick glance at issue 6 and remember how that one ended exactly. And once I saw that, I actually just looked at the last 2 pages of issue 6. It all was cleared up. I jumped back into issue 7 and just kept reading from there, and I ended up loving it. And I love that series. It's a fantastic series. But yeah, I definitely, and obviously that's a little different because they went on a hiatus. It was 3.5 months or whatever. But, I legit, you couldn't remember exactly how it ended. So that I had to kind of look back to. But yeah, you're right. Even on a regular basis, how often books are coming out right now, and depending how many you buy, how many you read, it can be really tricky to remember all those. So I'm glad that you brought that point up, because that's definitely something to consider. And I know you're calling it a weird way. I think it's a great way, and definitely a way that probably not a lot of collectors talk about enough. And for anybody who's newer to this hobby, or just getting into it, or just trying to figure out newer or better or more efficient ways to find time to read comic books, this might be your way. This might be a way that works for you. And again, just talking about reading that first issue. If you like it, then yeah, maybe you either you wait for the trade to come out at that point, or you collect all the issues and then you binge read from there. I've definitely done that. I was doing that with Something Is Killing Children. I'm still doing that technically. Waiting for trades to come out before I jump right into the next one. I thought about doing it with Philadelphia. I just love it so much. I want to jump right into each issue now. But I caught up now, right? And I was thinking about holding off, because it does read really well in trade. And so yeah, I'm still kind of on the fence with how I want to go about reading that, because I am just enjoying it. Saga is another great example where I think it reads much better in trade than it does just single issue. And again, just my personal opinion, the way I kind of retain things. So yeah, if that works better for you, if you're able to retain things better, or just enjoy the reading experience more by binge reading a collection of books as opposed to one every month or however long, then that's definitely something I would consider. So, Mark, thank you so much for the comment. I really appreciate it. Mr. Gore Vidal. He has a nice long comment here that goes a little bit more in detail of some of the items I was talking about from my top 5 new comic book day picks. And so I won't get into all that, but I really appreciate this comment. I'm going to scroll down a little bit and read the portion that answers the question of how often do you read comics. And so his answer, he says, to answer your question, or as to your question, whether one reads comics daily, maybe not daily, but I'm always reading something from a book or a comic. Some days it's just a book, others it's a mixture of both. Gore, appreciate the comment, and yeah, nice to know. I assume that you're reading at least on a daily basis, and that's awesome. I know that you're reading a lot of like you mentioned, either whether it's a book or a comic book, it's something that you're reading. So I love that, and I always say you're a very knowledgeable guy, and so that's where I'm assuming that you're taking time to always read, from a daily perspective, right? And I know you mentioned maybe not always daily, but obviously often enough. So Gore, thanks so much for the comment. Last comment that I'm going to read here today, and it is by BDG Comics. BDG says, how often do I read comics? I've been picking up 10 to 14 books a week. I like to read all of them, but space them out throughout the week so that even when Tuesday comes around, I still have at least one book left to read. I feel like it gives me more time to digest the stories. I don't feel like I need to slam through them, and if I miss a day or two of reading, I have a day where I get to read several books. BDG Comics, awesome answer. Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to write it. And yeah, that's a great way to go about it too. Especially you're buying 10 to 14 new comic books each and every week. I think that's amazing. And obviously, yes, gives you plenty to read as you can space that out, right? If you were buying 14 books, that's, you're reading 2 a week. You can read, 2 a day. That's, fits out 7 days perfectly. And so that makes a lot of sense. And it gives you a little buffer time, right? As you mentioned, to kind of soak in what you just read. And I think that's really important too. I've definitely been guilty of kind of reading through something and not fully letting it sink in or letting it hit me in a way it probably should have, to where I, either have to go back and read it later, or I jump into the next issue and I kind of forget, as I was mentioning earlier, from like Mark's answer, like sometimes I might forget something and then I got to go back anyways and reread it. So I think it's nice to kind of take some time, digest that book that you just read. The other thing I also like to do as well, if you are taking that time to kind of digest, is after I read through, I will also take the time to flip through the book again and just, take time to soak in the actual artwork. Reread certain panels maybe that I was confused with or wanted to see again. Maybe it was just a really badass moment that I wanted to check out, something really cool. So I'll flip back and see that again. Again, just wanting to appreciate the artwork. If it's someone that I really like their artwork, I want to be able to kind of soak that in as well. So yeah, really great points to just kind of take your time and pace that out. And like you said, like as you get towards that Tuesday, like you don't want to necessarily have nothing left to read, right? So you always want to kind of have a little bit of a stack going. So it's nice that you kind of pace yourself out for that reason as well. Me personally, I'm also reading a bunch of older material as well. So I think for me, with where I'm at right now and the interest that I have in certain older comics, it kind of gives me a little bit of a, I try to read my new comic books like right on Tuesday and Wednesday, maybe leaking into a little bit of Thursday. But usually by Thursday or Friday, I have all the new comic books from that week read that I want to read. And then it allows me to kind of jump back into some of the older stuff, because I am forever trying to catch up with some of the older reading as well, some of the older series and comics that have been out over the years. So, but anyways, that's just me. I think it's great strategy that you're kind of going about this, BDG. So really appreciate that comment. And yeah, that is the last question, or the last comment that I was going to read here today. And again, thank everybody for leaving the comments that you have. If you're watching this right now, again, that's the question, is how often do you read comics? Feel free to leave a comment in this video, comment section below. Would love to still hear your thoughts. If you want to participate in these questions that I've been asking each and every week, just check out my Thursday video. It's the top 5 picks for New Comic Book Day coming out next week. I do it each and every week. It airs, premieres at 12:30 Eastern time every Thursday. So keep an eye out for those. I'll have a new question for you on its way. And again, for anybody wondering, I just kind of adjusted this because I just started asking these questions and I started getting a lot of answers from them. And I loved it. I just didn't want to tie it into my top 5 videos. So I wanted to kind of keep those 2 videos separate. So obviously I'm here right now making this video. So, but I'd love to hear your thoughts just in general on this stuff. And yeah, otherwise, appreciate you taking some time to watch this. Again, thanks for everybody who left a comment. Smash that like button on the way out. And until next time, I will talk to you later.